或许这是许多理想的政治人物消失在政坛的一个历史时刻。美国再也没有像前总统 Al Gore 这样的注重气候暖化的人。我们刚刚特别提到，拜登所有对于全球暖化、气候变迁的承诺一场空，而美国现在所面临的很短的时间里头100个龙卷风，人民所受到的苦，他也没有感觉。接着我们再来看，即使是对美国来讲大家都记得的大盐湖，科学家提出警告，它5年内即将消失。美国总统在乎吗？他在乎的是明年的连任。
Nearly 40 years ago, Utah's Great Salt Lake covered about 3,300 square miles. Today, it has shrunk to less than 1/3 of that size.
The demand for water is outstripping the supply of water to the Great Salt Lake.
Now, what used to be a safe haven for wildlife and an industrial powerhouse for the region is a looming ecological and economic disaster in Utah and across the world.
The Great Salt Lake is an economic engine for this region.
We know too many examples around the world where terminal lakes have dried up and the outcome has not been good.
您或许以为一个湖泊的干枯只不过是一个地方的问题，事实并非如此。
The worst-case scenario for Utah's shrinking Great Salt Lake can be seen 600 miles southwest at Owens Lake Bed in California. Owens Lake dried up decades ago, decimating the local economy and producing some of the worst levels of dust pollution in the United States, according to a 2020 study. Los Angeles County ultimately spent about $2.5 billion in dust mitigation efforts.
Great Salt Lake is 15 times larger. The cost is going to be exponentially more.
如最新报告显示，如果2024年河水流入量没有急剧增加，大盐湖将在未来的5年内消失。湖水都到哪里去了呢？
What has happened since the pioneers first came here is they started diverting water from the rivers that fed the Great Salt Lake. So the amount of water that is being diverted from these rivers has increased exponentially and is going to do so into the future because our population is booming.
More recently, this problem has been compounded by severe drought and higher temperatures throughout the American West.
But then there's a secondary factor, and that factor is climate change.
受过度饮水和极端气候双重打击，大盐湖已连续2年降至历史最低水位。目前水位比往年平均水位低了19英尺，并且有60%的河床暴露在外。
Now, industries that depend on the Great Salt Lake are being forced to adapt, like the mineral extraction industry, which accounts for about $1.3 billion in annual economic output, according to a report commissioned by the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council.
Magnesium, potassium, and lithium are found in world-class concentrations in the Great Salt Lake.
Joe Havasey is the director of natural resources for Compass Minerals, one of the largest mineral extraction companies on the lake. It produces key ingredients used in lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. It is also North America's largest producer of potassium sulfate, a fertilizer required to grow high-end crops like fruits and nuts.
What we do is we draw brine in from the Great Salt Lake into large open evaporation ponds. In the evaporation ponds, the water evaporates, leaving beds of crystalline, recoverable minerals.
This process contributes to lower lake levels too, accounting for about 13% of total water diversion. The lake is also a critical resource for the manufacturer US Magnesium, a company that is the sole provider of primary magnesium metal in the country.
So if you hold a soda pop can in your hand, or if you go sit on a stadium bleacher that is made of aluminum, the magnesium in those cans and in those stadium bleachers comes from the Great Salt Lake.
A dwindling lake would also reduce available jobs.
So broadly, the mineral extraction industry on the Great Salt Lake employs over 5,000 people. So there would be, hundreds, if not thousands, of job losses associated with that.
The drying lake is also affecting an industry that is crucial to the local economy, and even your own seafood consumption. 45% of the world's brine shrimp comes from this lake, and they're used to raise fish and shrimp in aquaculture facilities around the world.
So if you go out to dinner in New York City, for example, and you get shrimp cocktail, the chances that your shrimp ate brine shrimp from the Great Salt Lake is very likely.
But as the lake water drops, its salt content increases, threatening the lake's brine shrimp.
We are at a tipping point right now with salinity levels for Great Salt Lake. As we're starting to see a decline in the brine shrimp population, we're seeing brine shrimp having a harder time reproducing. They're working so hard to shed the salt and just simply stay alive.
The world-renowned ski resorts in the mountains surrounding the Great Salt Lake are also bracing for changes. In the winter, the lake benefits nearby ski resorts by influencing the local climate and weather, producing lake-effect snowstorms. If the evaporation continues and lake-effect snow decreases, Utah's ski season could be shortened, costing the industry up to $9.6 million annually. Perhaps most alarming for the region's 1.2 million residents would be the dry lake bed sending poisonous dust into the air that millions breathe. A 2019 study from the University of Utah found that the lake bed contains arsenic and other dangerous heavy metals, much of it residue from mining activity in the region. If the lake continues to shrink, the state could spend more than $330 million on dust-containing mitigation measures over the next 20 years.
The best solution to keep dust down, it's to keep water in the lake.
每一个冬天都将是拯救大盐湖的最好时机。
There is no single fix for the Great Salt Lake's dwindling water levels. Saving the lake would require letting more snowmelt from the mountains flow into the basin, which means less water for residents and farmers. In Utah's recent state legislative session, lawmakers approved a range of projects to protect the long-term health of the Great Salt Lake.
This past legislative session was a tremendous win for Great Salt Lake, and we had over $500 million in projects that will be directly impacting Great Salt Lake, and we're optimistic that those will help us bring water to the lake.
大盐湖只是地球上许多可能消失的美景之一，希望犹他州及时的预算可以让气候变迁带来的浩劫至少减少一个项目，留下著名的大盐湖。